My name is Mr. Mohammed Sora Ibrahim Kamara. I work as an emergency medicine consultant in Greater Manchester, and I have done for the past 6, 7 years. Um, I graduated over 30 years ago and have been involved in various specialties um, of the profession, and I've ended up since 2001 doing emergency medicine. I have a passion of trying to help sensitize our people, educate them on not only the racial inequalities but also the health inequalities that we face, and try and do my best to address these issues. I hail from Sierra Leone uh, in West Africa, and I've been here for the most part of my life, and try to do my best to get our people to be able to enjoy the same benefits that the counterparts do enjoy. And that's my passion, and that is why I actually decided to enroll with CAHN. Working in the front line, obviously, is not fun. Now, it's a roller coaster of emotions when you're standing there, because you never know what comes through those doors. It's a revolving door, and therefore it could be the person who's absolutely fighting for their lives, and someone who's just coming in for something not as serious as that. That's what I would say. Now, it bothers you no end when you see colleagues losing their lives, paying the ultimate price for something that is so noble. And yet you get that satisfaction that you probably made the difference in somebody else's life. So that's what I mean by roller coaster of emotions. You do help, you make a difference, and then you feel helpless when you see people that you care for, that you are with together, succumbing to this disease. And it's been difficult, both mentally, physically exhausting, a lot of burnout, and probably we haven't even scratched the surface in terms of the aftermath, because we're still, as I say, dealing with the initial, if you like, impact of it. But then the medium term and the long term are yet to actually surface. And I think it's actually beginning to show that there's a lot of absences, a lot of people moving away from the profession, a lot of people citing exhaustion, people pressured to work when they're exhausted, when they're tired, and not performing at their very best, not firing on all cylinders, so to speak. So there are really huge responsibilities, on people's shoulders when you're there, and it tells when you probably go home, because people say you need to leave work at work and when you're home, but that's one of the impossibilities of life. You're caring for the people, you want them to get better, and you might think you would want to take everybody else's burden on you. And when you get home, clearly it comes with you. It might not be at the same level, at the same, probably. But there's no two ways about it. It impacts on you big time. And you've got to try and probably not crash whilst you're doing your job to the best of your ability. I mean, COVID-19 vaccines are very safe. And I'm thankful that in the UK, we have two main bodies. We have the MHRA, and we have the JVCI, that's the Joint Committee of Vaccination and Immunization. Now, a lot of people think we had HIV, which is a similar virus to the COVID-19 virus. and up until we speak, there's no vaccine for HIV. That is true, but then the RNA virus, which is, the HIV and the COVID-19, is a very clever virus because it mutates, it changes, and as I speak, there's 13 variants out there. So the difficulty you have is people will say, well, this came in too early, this came in too soon. What is it they're covering? Well, there's no cover-up. It's just that the world, as we know it, was at its knees. And you think about Saudi Arabia, people go on pilgrimage once a year, the 12th month of the year. People go on Umrah, like visits every day. And that in itself, on the Hajj period, at that, you're looking at 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and in that time you have 3 million people converging to that small area. So you're looking at 3 million people, each of them having paid £2,500. Just imagine that. Hundreds of millions of pounds. That had to be halted. So it just gives you a small fraction of what we're talking about. So the world as we know it was at its knees, and therefore something needed to be done pretty sharpish, pretty fast, for us to be able to combat this monster, as it were. Therefore, the need for people to come together and do what is required of them to prevent or save lives. Simple as that. And that's why the vaccines, as I say, they would not choose whether you're black or white or yellow or green. You need it because the virus is indiscriminate. However, people of the BAME community are more at risk because of the fact that we have underlying problems that we don't know about, and therefore we're not very astute in terms of, taking care of our health needs and things. And besides that, there's the vitamin D issue, which has been found scientifically to be impactful on whoever gets it and whoever doesn't, or whoever is likely to get it. So, as I say, we, representatives of the BAME community, should be more inclined to be queuing, to be heading the queues in order to be able to get vaccinated, because we get disproportionately affected. And therefore, the vaccines, if you want to talk about safety, well, I'd say some of the experiments or some of the research was done in South Africa involving black people. And that we know has been proved to be efficacious. In terms of efficacy, you're looking at 60 to 80%. And of course, people have been taking it now. As I speak, I think we have over 50 million people that have taken it in the UK. And so far, the side effects we have are very minimal compared to the benefits. So I'd say they're very safe, and it doesn't stop there. The JCVI and the MHRA continue to monitor for any side effects that may be undesirable, and therefore the reason why the AstraZeneca, the AZ vaccine, was actually slightly changed when they found out that there is the very rare possibility of developing a clot, maybe in the leg or in the chest or in the brain, and therefore the under 30s are now signposted to take the Pfizer as opposed to the AstraZeneca. So it just goes to show you that in view of the fact that you've got the tick, the approval, and perhaps you've had the production of it, but it doesn't stop. You still monitor it for short-term, medium-term, and long-term effects. And if it is undesirable, it is definitely altered. And that is why you can see AstraZeneca is now not being offered to the under 30s. Touched on that on the other question, as is the pace or rapidity or whatever you may want to call it of the production of these vaccines, as I said, is based on the fact that the world as we know it in 1918 lost 55 million people from a total of 500 million people that contracted the disease, and it lasted for 2 years. And in that period, you had 3 spikes of the disease, of the illness. So, they didn't have the vaccine then. We now have the possibility of at least trying to prevent that kind of death. And you could call it divine intervention. The death rate of this COVID-19 illness is 2 to 3%, as opposed to something that is comparable to it. There's another coronavirus which comes from the Middle East, which is the MERS, and the death rate of that one is significantly higher. if that was the case with this, clearly we wouldn't even have places to bury people. So we needed to make sure that we have to fight this thing step by step. Otherwise, it would envelop the world, it will stop the world, and of course the world as we know it would not be as it is. In fact, the world as we know it now would be post-COVID and pre-COVID, because this is here to stay and it's not going anywhere. But we have to cope with it, we have to stand with it. And as I said, from one variant that we know, there are 13 variants now. It keeps changing. Same as the flu, they're of the same family. The flu virus changes. Every year we get it, every year we change it, and that's what we have to be doing in this one. So you have to stand toe to toe with it. When you're doing research, it takes a long time. You start with you have to decide the topic you're going to be, investigating or maybe researching on. And then of course you have the preclinical trials where you do your testing on the animals. And then once you get past that, you go on to the clinical trials, which will start phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So all of those would last between 1 and 2, 3 years. If you imagine that, that would take you up to 15, 16 years or something. And of course, it's a big question of funding. If the money is not there, then of course it dries up. You then get slowed down. Besides that, there's the ethics committees as well you have to go through. People will have to agree that indeed this is ethically, okay to do. Other than that, you can't. So all of those steps will take time. But then, as things stood, there was no time in our favor. There wasn't time in our, if you like, on our side. Therefore, we needed to act fast. And so, once the genomic sequencing, they call it, when they found the gene of the virus, it was plain sailing, because then the world decided that, look, in South Africa, we've got this. In America, we've got this. In Africa, we've got this. In Australia, we've got this. Therefore, we need to brainstorm, come together as one. And so when you find something, you confer with me. I find something, and so we can get this thing quicker rather than later. Other than that, we are doomed. And that is what was done. So there's no cover-ups. The money was pumped into it. All the steps were taken away because they needed to act fast and get people to be safe. And the only way of saving that is by having a potent vaccine. Now, there's something called, in medicine, herd immunity, which means, herd immunity means about 70-80% of the population is probably immune or maybe got some protection against any kind of illness. For you to achieve that, in this particular case, especially when there's an airborne illness, as you call it, you need a very potent vaccine and pretty sharp. And that is where this came from. There's one message I would want people to take home with them. You might be lucky with one variant, but remember, this virus is very clever. I repeat, very clever, and it has the strength, the power to change and mutate as we know it. Today, as I speak, in Lambeth, there's now surge testing. This is London. It wasn't so yesterday. Today it has changed. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. So you can be lucky with 1, 2, 3, 5 variants. But then you might not be so lucky with the 13th variant, which might be the most potent one. The only way you can assure yourself that you are at least covered against hospitalization, against death from this virus, is by getting the vaccine. And the vaccine would cover you. How long it would cover you, nobody knows. It'll be 6 months, it'll be 9 months, it'll be 12 months. Because as you look at the flu, we take it every year because we have to renew that protection. Yeah? So therefore, you might need to get another one. But as things stand, with the here and now is such that we need to get ourselves protected. And the only potent way of protecting ourselves is by taking the vaccine. Remember, we are indiscriminately affected. Indiscriminately affected. Yeah? And we, as the BAME community, are disproportionately affected. Therefore, we need to heed the advice of the professionals. Take the vaccine when it's your turn. When you're invited, take the vaccine. you probably would thank your lucky stars that you did. As far as I know, there's nothing in the Quran that would tell you that you should not take vaccines. In fact, from the hadith of the Prophet, peace be upon him, there are three things I would like to say. One, it says in the hadith that obey the laws of the land you live in. And if the laws of the land are such that you need to protect yourself against this, then I think it's vitally important to know that by you disagreeing or maybe disobeying with that, you probably are disobeying your Prophet. And it's in the Quran, they say, Ati'u Allah wa Ati'u Rasul. Obey your God and obey the prophets. Because these are the ordained people who have been sent with the message of God to deliver that message. It's as simple as that. So the other thing is, the vaccines are thoroughly checked for things like maybe porcine products, i.e. the ones that have pork on it. Now, the Jews, as we know, they have kosher. The Muslims, as we know, they have halal. And these vaccines have all been checked against such. And they've all been given the seal of approval. There's nothing with porcine origin on it. So therefore, it's halal. And all the imams of the UK are in agreement with this. So I'd say, when your turn comes and you are invited, please, please, please go for the vaccine. There's nothing haram in that. And in fact, if you were fasting, say you were observing Ramadan as it were, it would not in any way nullify your fasting if you took the vaccine. That's even more the reason why you should take the vaccine, because when you're fasting, your immune system is called to task, and therefore you need something that will top up your immune system, because you're not eating as you should, you're not drinking as you should, you're not sleeping as you should, and that influences the immune system to the extent whereby it dips a bit, and when it dips, you need to top it up. So if the vaccine is there to protect you, I'd say the laws of the land are that take the vaccine. And if you are a believer, you need to obey the laws of the land that you live in. I mean, as I say, I'd say there are certain steps we need to be taking as members of the BAME community. We need to refrain from being easily convinced or coerced into leaning towards the anti-vaxxers. And when we do receive these messages, I urge you, please, 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 do not forward them to the next person. You might be able to resist, but the next person might not be so independently minded. Therefore, refrain from doing that. Do your own research. I mean, Dr. Google is there for everybody. People do it. Do your own research. If you really are hesitant, then your best bet is to probably go on to the NICE guidelines. There's a place called NICE. There's a website called NICE. There's a website called WHO, World Health Organization. You can go into them, and I don't think they will give you the wrong advice, because they give it for the whole of the world, the rest of the world. So therefore, my message to you is, we are here to help. We're not here to cover up for anything. It is important to remember that this disease, this monster kills. The lucky thing is, there's 2 to 3% only out of every 100 that contract it. That is the saving grace. I guarantee you, if it was 35% like the other ones, we will not be talking about this. So you have the opportunity to act, and act now. Think about your brothers and sisters in Africa who want the vaccine. They can't afford it. They're not getting it. Now the lucky thing is they have the vitamin D levels higher than us. The portion of food they eat is less, they're more active, and when you exercise, you've got something in the muscles called myokines, and the myokines build the immune system. So there's a lot of issues there in Africa which helps them, and that is why it was just like a very unexpected, if you like, development where people thought that Africa would be decimated when this pandemic broke out. But thankfully, through divine intervention, it's not happened. It's the least affected continent. But they still need it. They still need the vaccines, and they can't afford it. Here you are, You've got it. Well, why look a gift horse in the mouth? You might just regret it. I tell you what, I've seen colleagues buried. They didn't ask for it. I've seen colleagues who've come from retirement just to help, to cope with the workload, the demand, the pressures. And in so doing, they contracted this illness and died from it. I care for these people. They came to do a good job. And they paid with their lives. They deserve that their memories are actually, if you like, highlighted by people at least taking up what it is they lost their lives for. Making sure that if I lost my life, it would have been for a good purpose, a good cause. And therefore, my people, I strongly urge you to take this vaccine when you get the opportunity to do so, because otherwise you might just regret it. And I don't think regret is something that you want in your vocabulary. Well, nurses and doctors, like I said, we're all vulnerable. In fact, we're the ones that should be actually, standing ahead of the queue, heading the queues to get this thing done, really, to get vaccinated and get protected. Because believe you me, this disease, if it was something that you would inject into yourself, like for example a blood-borne disease, you know that you're safe because you're not injecting anything, you're not getting it through the blood. But this is something that is actually transmitted from person to person. When this thing started, we all thought it was like a zoonosis, they call it, from animal to human. Nobody thought that this thing would actually develop that kind of characteristic where it moves from human to human. We heard about swine flu, we have avian flu, bird flu and all that. Yeah, these are real and they did happen and we survived it because of the fact that we all came together. So as nurses, we should be setting the example. We should be setting the pace. We should be heading the queue and trying to encourage our clients, because where they are in the nursing homes, that is most prolific. They're the most ones at risk. Therefore, they need to be protecting themselves and their clients. You've got to remember that these people's immune system may be weak, and if yours is strong, think about it. You might prevent yourself from getting it because you've got the natural protection of a strong immune system. But what about the patient that you're dealing with? What about the care home resident? They might not have theirs that is as strong as yours. Would you want to have that on your conscience, that you passed it on to them? Because you see, there's something called subclinical manifestation of an illness. Subclinically, you don't know you have it. It's there, you don't know you have it. And you're still able to pass it on. So would you want that on your conscience, that look, I actually care for this person. I come to work with this person every day, but because of the fact that I had it and I didn't get any symptoms with it, I've passed it on to them. I don't think you want that. So take the vaccine as soon as it's possible to do so. The benefits far, far, far outweigh the risks.